Shri Om Nyuto Sho. Okay, let's do the 4 limitless contemplations and really do them very mindfully. May all beings have happiness and create the causes of happiness. May they all be free from suffering and creating the causes of suffering. May they find that noble happiness which can never be tainted by suffering. May they attain universal impartial compassion, free of worldly bias towards friends and enemies. Semjin damje dewatang dewe jutang denpa Dungal tang, dungal chichi tang trawajitik, dungal mepe dewa tang patang mindrawajitik, nearing chak tang trawe tang num chempola nepa juche. So good evening, everybody. It's lovely to see you. And tonight we're going to go on, but last week was a bit of a disaster with all the extra load shedding. So I am going to go over a lot of things. It was like I was teaching one group, and then the next thing is I was teaching another group, other than a couple of people who stayed stable. It was a crazy evening. So I'm going to go back to a lot of things of understanding the depth of the causes and conditions of our relative daily lives. Okay, and this is really, really an important thing, because a lot of us talk very glibly about karma, about causes, about effects. We forget about the conditions. And I want to look at this very, very deeply. I really do, because I would like to see this year that everybody changes the causes and conditions of their lives and comes to a different state. And once you come to a different state, then no matter what's going on outside, it doesn't really matter. And I'm going to start with this beautiful story of what happened in Cambodia. And it's also beautiful and relevant to look at the Turkish earthquake at the moment, the Shivani, because with the Turkish earthquake, what I find so fascinating is that there's Ukraine, and Ukraine is really, when you look at the earthquake and you look at Ukraine, it's really scary, because I look at Ukraine and I think that's man done. And that's nature done. Nature done, there's not much you could do about it, because that's our karma of it. But man done, when you see buildings collapsing and everything, you've really got to wonder about those causes and conditions and look at both. Anyway, I think that's a very relevant thing, because a lot of people say, how did all the people get there in the earthquake? There's not one person that is there that doesn't need to be there. That's the interesting thing. Even people who've flown into Turkey and are suddenly there temporarily. And that's the point. We're in the right place at the right time. We just can't see it. So let me read you this beautiful story. When we are willing to rest with trust on this earth, the great force of life will begin to move through us. I saw this force of life in the midst of tremendous desolation some years ago in the dry and barren land of the Cambodian refugee camps, which I'd visited to assist the refugees. And I'm comparing it with the whole world going to Turkey and Syria's help to try and help them, that suddenly when there's a disaster, then everybody comes together. It's a pity that it's only then. After the Cambodian Holocaust, only parts of families had survived. A mother with 2 children, an old uncle and 2 nephews, and each was given a little bamboo hut about 4 feet wide and 6 feet long and 5 feet high. In front of each hut was a little patch of land, perhaps no bigger than 1 square yard. Only after a few months of camp life, next to most of the huts in their little squares of ground, people had planted gardens. They would have a squash plant with 2 or 3 small squash on it, or a bean plant, or some kind of vegetable. The plants were very carefully tended with little bamboo stakes for support. The tendrils of a bean plant would wind around the stake and up over the roof of the house. Every day, each refugee family would walk 1 mile and stand for a half an hour in a long line at the pit well at the far end of the camp, and carry back a bucket of water for their plants. It was a beautiful, beautiful thing to see these gardens in the middle of this camp in the dry season, when you could barely believe that anything would ever grow, and that people who were suffering so much would even think about giving to growth. As these war-shattered families planted and watered their tiny gardens, they awakened the unstoppable force of life. So can we, no matter what inner difficulty or outer suffering we may experience, in tending to the darkness with compassion, we will discover the same unstoppable life force. Now, this for me is so important with what's going on in the world, and with what's going on with all of you, not only all of you, but all the people that I'm getting desperado calls from, people that are feeling so awful and really struggling with everything in their lives. And you know what? It's so important. This is where we come to that Buddha nature, because that's the only thing to resolve the problem ultimately. And when we spend all our time resolving all the little problems that we've got in front of us, that is really not how it should be, because the projector is inside, and the projection of the movie of our lives and everything is outside. Now, there was a beautiful master called Khenpo Pema Vajra, and in a poignant article in a book entitled Beyond the Ordinary Mind, Beyond the Human Mind, he spoke about suffering and its causes, and he said, the 4 noble truths were taught by the Buddha for the sake of beginners who wish to leave samsara, the illusionary world, behind and attain liberation. He said they are explained in terms of, and I loved the way he explained it. Point 1, the characteristics of samsara. What is samsara made of? It is suffering as we know it. Even when we're happy, it's going to change in a minute, and then it's going to be suffering. So the characteristics of samsara. 2, what are the causes for the characteristic of samsara? Is karma and negative emotions. That's the inner part. And then thirdly, the characteristics of liberation. How do we get to a point when suffering ceases? How do we get to that point when there's no more suffering? And that's what the whole meaning of the teaching was about. And lastly, the 4th one, the methods for attaining it, the path. So the Buddha said, and he gives it in beautiful poetic form, and I love it. He said, this is the truth about suffering. The truth about suffering, wow, Stephanie, the truth of suffering is to be understood. So he says, this is the truth of suffering. The truth of suffering must be understood. Second, this is the truth of the origin. The truth of the origin is to be abandoned. Very interesting. The truth of the origin is to be abandoned. And then he went on, this is the truth of cessation, how it stops. He says, the truth of cessation is to be attained. And lastly, he says, this is the truth of the path. The truth of the path is to be relied upon. That's the only way that we can get there, is what we've been given, to go along that pathway. And most of us are so engrossed in our lives, we haven't got time. Now, Kathy, you've got 2 weeks at home. Stephanie, I'm very happy to see, and Shivani, I'm very happy to see, even if I can't see your faces, and Marcel. Kath, these 2 weeks have got to be a time of change, because those 4 things have got to be realized by you in these 2 weeks. Okay, because you've done it for a long time. So we need to understand these 4 at first, and then slowly through practice, we arrive at a recognition, a re-knowing that we have a true nature. And this is what we're moving back to. Now, what I want to say, which is what the Dalai Lama, what I was trying to say last time, and this being Trale Gamchon, who is an amazing master, and I'll give you his stuff, because he shows how in your consciousness, you've got the imprints and you've got the freedom. So you've got to put them both together. But what most of us are looking at is, we talk glibly about, yes, I've got this nature, it's very beautiful, I'm moving towards it and everything, but we do not give it the full trust of our lives. And I am saying that to give it the full trust of our lives is our only hope. Okay, because there is no other solution. You know, every morning when I come into my shrine room, I just pray when I give my offering of tea to the Dharma protectors, which is just a beautiful symbol of giving tea to the Dharma protector. I always give them, I say, please, the only way that we can solve the problems of all the world and the suffering is to know who we really are. And you can't glibly say that. You've got to really go back to it, so that in the moment of crisis, if you were under the ground in that earthquake and slowly the breath was going out of you, I mean, I have horrors to think of that. But if you were, could you be ready? Could you say, this suffering is clearing the level of the relativity of my life, and now I need to be ready to leave. This is only the physical body under the ground, but I am still free. Now, if we don't have that, then what hope do we have in the world? And so our awakened nature was always there. It is we in our delusions that move away from it. And then the suffering starts. Go back to Christianity, go back to the Bible, go back to Judaism. What did it say? It said that there was this beautiful Garden of Eden. Oh, what a lovely fairy tale, except it wasn't a fairy tale. The Garden of Eden was the pure creation from the essence. The Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve were plucking whatever they wanted, where there was love and abundance and fruit and food and whatever else you wanted, was not a fantasy. That was how, out of the essence, the creation happened. Until one day, somebody said, I want to be separate from this. I am very important. I am a person called Adam. I am a person called Eve. I am a person called Melanie. We took that and we made that self up. There was something of a self, but not what we thought. And it's such an amazing thing when I listen to the teachings of Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche, because he says there, he's talking about the Prajna Paramita, and he says, form is emptiness and emptiness is form. And he says, what does it mean? And why did the Buddha teach about self? Why did he teach about form and self? He says, because we made a mistake, because we saw the form or the self as something independent, not made up of causes and conditions, We saw it as something that was solid, that would go on, life after life. And what I've been talking to the people that have died now, I've been saying, your life was just a tiny fraction of everything you are. It's now time to see that the I is not a solid thing. It's just made up of interdependent things. And how it came about are the same causes and conditions. That's what I was trying to tell you last time. The same causes and conditions that the Dalai Lama said disintegrate life. So we come into a life as a being, and then slowly we disintegrate and we go back into the essence. And if we don't understand that, we've got a real problem. If we see a child going towards a fire or a hot plate, we shout, no, don't touch it. It will make an owie. Be careful, it will make an owie. Yet in the last few months, I have watched adults going into situations that are going to burn them. Okay, like a hot plate. They've created causes and conditions that might have been necessary, but will burn them. And I seem to be often with this finger warning people and saying, please don't do this because you're going to be burnt. And they say to me, but I can't help it. Because without this, I'm empty. Without this, I can't do it. With whatever I'm doing, I can't stop myself from doing it. And if I don't do it, I feel awful. I'm drawn to it in every way. It's about a destructive relationship that either has to end or change. It's about an addiction which just continues on, destroying everything in its path. And then waking up, I watch people who are addicts come out of it and then saying, now I'm going on a journey. And I go like, hang on, here's the bowl of your Buddha nature, because that's the only thing that's going to change it. Not all the courses you're doing, not all the things you're doing. Only when you can find it inside yourself can you stop, because they don't stop. Or not getting over a negative experience, emotional pattern, just fixating on and on and on. Now, this is where the Buddha nature comes into the equation, and the habitual momentum, that momentum, okay, that has gone on for lifetimes, many lifetimes, is so strong. As soon, and I promise you it's so strong, as soon as you connect with the Buddha nature, it has the power to disintegrate those causes and conditions. Today, I was shouting to someone, do you realize that this negative attitude that you've got is so strong that I am working like a dog today to try and get you out of it, and you are staying in it. And you need to see that this negative momentum is very, very, very strong. And you need to make friends with it. Because if you don't make friends with it, it overtakes you. It's like that snowball. Boom, 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 down the mountain it comes, getting bigger and bigger and bigger until it crashes all over you and you can't get out of it. Okay, of course you can get out of it. As soon as you realize that you are more, as soon as you realize if it's a really negative, deep pattern over many lifetimes. And I said to this person, it's a deep pattern over many, many lifetimes. As soon as something goes wrong, that negative force comes up. And then you're analyzing it, and then you're saying, yeah, I'm never going to manage this, and I'm never going to manage that. And it just takes over. And I said, I'm sitting with you, and I am really a strong person. And oh my God, I'm working too hard. Okay, I can't work hard with you like this. You have to give me something that I can help you to get back to that nature. Because what is so important is we have to stop. I'll give you a chance now to talk and ask. We have to, and I want you to. We have to stop the momentum with awareness and then go on to a serious spiritual path. It doesn't have to be hours. As long as you set aside even 20 minutes a day, because the 20 minutes a day is not about the ritual. That's what I was telling them yesterday, that Ringu Tulku said, when you're doing prostrations, that's a way of taking refuge and getting bodhicitta, that beautiful nature, together. But you don't have to do prostrations. There are many ways you can pay homage and take refuge and make bodhicitta. So I don't care if you spend 15 minutes in the morning, but that 15, 20 minutes has got to be to remind you, because during that time you start to trust something which is not subject to causes and conditions. That's why the Dalai Lama has given this teaching so importantly, because it's not. We go back to our original human nature, not original Buddha nature, awakened nature. You can leave out the word Buddha if you want, not the human nature. But we have to start trusting our Buddha nature through even a little practice and get a totally different perspective view of the causes and conditions that we have created. Now, just to go back to last week, and then I will throw it open truly for questioning. To go back to what Taisitu said of Guru Rinpoche verses, okay? When causes and conditions manifest, when causes and conditions manifest, the plants will blossom. Not before. If one of the conditions isn't there, then it won't blossom. Okay? So when the causes and conditions manifest, the plants will blossom. Now listen to his next line. When everything is inwardly done, it's time to manifest outwardly. Guru Rinpoche manifested as a person, and then everything happened as it should at the right time. Also for us, Taisitu asks, and I said this last time, does anything happen to us that's not supposed to be happening to us? No. For us, the right thing will happen when all the causes and conditions are there. Just by not wanting the suffering, it won't go away. Just by wanting something, it won't come into manifestation. He says, only when all inner circumstances are right will what you really feel manifest outside, not before. So if you start to change the causes and conditions of your life with a passion, with an everything. Diana texted me tonight. She said, oh, I've got to work late again, Melanie. I don't know what's happening and I can't come. And I said, be careful, because, you know, without realizing it, we create the causes and conditions and then it manifests. So even though it might be a work thing that manifests, it might be something else that manifests, but the cause, the inside has got to be sorted out. It's got to be not sorted out inside, it's got to be understood and then connected to inside. Once the inside is right, then it doesn't make a difference what is happening in your life. Open for questions or comments. Okay, Eric. Short, Eric.
You know what, Mel? Hi. Thanks. It's lovely, of course. I love everything you're saying. I just wanted to say one thing, and again, it's from the text. If we really took to heart and not just intellectually conceived of what you're trying to tell us here about cause and effect and karma and causes and conditions coming together, we would never, ever engage in another negative act again. We would ensure that all of our activities were positive and wholesome. We would, I mean, I'll just add one more thing. All the suffering of all the lower realms is nothing more than the product of negative actions. If we took this seriously, we would really arrive at perfect awakening.
Okay,
level
but now, Eric,
Yeah.
I don't want to hear your philosophy. I'm giving the philosophy. When you can tell me one thing from your heart and your experience, when you could say to me, my experience is, not quoting a master, not anything, this is my experience. I'm going to listen with open ears, okay? Because you know what? It's time now. You're spending so much time on your spiritual path, okay, which is amazing. But now I want to hear these profound heart statements coming from you. And what you're saying is 100% correct. I'm not criticizing it one iota, and thank you for it. But I want to hear how it does. I want to ask Kathy, not tonight because she's still not feeling okay. But I want to ask, how did that negative situation change you? How does it make you realize that the self isn't solid, that everything that happens to you is actually okay? Here you're sitting. We're normally watching you walking through the station, okay? Now you're sitting. MO, what a wonderful opportunity. Do you know what I mean? It's important, but not tonight. Anyone else? Please ask or comment or say how to fix it. I don't mind how, whatever level of statement. It is really important for all of you to really, really understand this for yourselves and your life, because we say it comes from inside, but most of us don't really, really believe that.
Mel, sorry, can I ask?
Of course, Danielle, please.
So I know I've done some, like I did the retreat with you and we had all those prayers and all that, and it just, to be honest, I walked out there feeling completely overwhelmed. There were too many different things. For me, the thought of 20 minutes in the morning, like I actually don't know what I would do with that time. Like I would like to know a very simple structure that's not confusing, and I also would prefer something in English so that it feels like I can understand it. Yeah, I don't know if you could talk us through that, or if you can speak to me on the side about it.
I will speak to you on the side, but I want to say, for everybody's purpose, that, you know, someone texted me today, someone who's actually been doing Buddhism for a long time, but I can hear in the text that that this person is really struggling with the practice, you know, and wants me to make some meditations so that he'll be able to really be concentrated on his journey, which I'm happy to do. I'll do that for anyone. What is very important in the beginning is those 4 mind changes. Okay, the 4 mind changes for people who haven't been doing practice are probably the most important thing. And you know, when you contemplate the mind changes, and I'll give them to you quickly, but you know, when you contemplate them very, very deeply, for 5 minutes, it's fine. So you only take one at a time and you contemplate it. You could take it from the book. So they give you a lot of topics, you know, to contemplate. But for example, the first one is the preciousness of human life, or the preciousness of human birth. Now, you know, we really don't contemplate that very, very much. We don't contemplate the preciousness of human birth or human life. We just take it for granted. Here we are, and I'm suffering and blah, blah, blah. But when you actually, and I have spent many months contemplating that one sentence, there is so much. Because when you are really at the lowest of low points in your life, at a low ebb, it's really hard to see the preciousness of human birth. But when you begin to understand that you created those causes and conditions in the first place, somewhere way back, then you begin to realize how precious this human life is. And then you start to contemplate all the aspects of your life. You know how many times I do this, Dan? I do this a million times, and I will help you with the practice alone, okay? But the preciousness of human life. Then the second one, impermanence and death. Now, if I contemplated impermanence and death for the rest of this life, I wouldn't finish contemplating it. Because as soon as we understand impermanence, it is because the human being places value in permanent things. We think a relationship is going to be there forever. We think our house is going to be there forever. Our job is going to be there forever. Our mom and dad is going to be there forever. You know, it's funny when you lose your parents at an old age and then you say, geez, I'm an orphan. You know, I've got a new label. I'm an orphan. Even though you've got your own grown-up children, you go, sure, I'm an orphan, you know, kind of thing. You know, when you start not thinking about impermanence, but realizing impermanence, then suddenly that fixation, that attachment, that absolute, this is going to last and this is how I want it to be, starts changing. So I'm just giving you those two. Then you contemplate karma, then you contemplate how this is a life in samsara is like putting your head on an execution block, and you contemplate all the levels of suffering and everything. So taking one of those, and I will show you where the reference is like enough, together with a little practice, to be able to, we'll do some tonight, where you are breathing and you are allowing, breathing in and out, and you are allowing everything to come up without fixating, and you're developing that awareness. Those two practices are fine for the beginning. Okay, but like I told you, it's really important to have a little spot in your house. And I'll tell you the reason why. Because you build up an energy. If you sort of, oh, I'll do a little bit at work and I'll do a little bit here. If you don't have a little place, even if it's a tiny little shrine with a candle and a Buddha if you want, if you don't want a Buddha, it doesn't really matter. But if you just have a tiny place, which builds up energy. When you go in there, you feel, oh, this is different from everything else in my life. And you feel, when I come in here, I feel such a sense of relief. I feel such a sense of peace. I feel such a sense of everything. And it's here that I can touch that Buddha nature, that awakened nature, which is what what the Dalai Lama was saying. Did you want to say something, Karen?
Yes, when it goes on, you know, Mel, I don't know if this helps, but what I did, I mean, I would say I'm fortunate that my family died when, I mean, you want to say, I mean, when I was very young. So I'm very like, okay with death and ready then, but it's probably from past lives, but that I was ready from the age of 8, aware of death. And from then, I still, to use your word, contemplate it. And it's changed. I don't know if this will help. I can't remember who just spoke, but, and I still do, I contemplate, I'm not going into the practices or anything, death. And then when you become, you know, because all of us from childhood, I think most of us probably here have all been kept away from death. And it's like something scary and horrific.
So
whereas, fortunately, the Buddhists and that are okay with it. It's their friends, if you welcome it. So I've always, and I still do, spend, you saying the 20 minutes, it's immaterial the time, make a specific time. It's normally 4 o'clock in the morning with me, and I focus on death. That's all. I'm not doing any practices. I only on my death. And then from then I've discovered, working backwards, let's say my human birth, which becomes, as you say, impermanent.
Beautiful.
And what I'm doing now is I'm aware of all my faults, everything is aware of the imprints. So if you're talking of changing conditioning, is I'm working on those imprints. And there's just something like I want to ask you to explain. So you mentioned you had these people sitting in front of you and you can see what's wrong in the relationship and what they should do. And it's like bashing your head against a wall because it's so there for you.
Yes.
And
yes.
now again, I'm asking this person, your client, or whatever, are in the right place at the right time.
Exactly.
I'm just asking for you and for them.
You see,
So
it's not always for them. The right
that's what I
time.
want to know.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's urgent. For me, it feels urgent. Why?
Because you can see it. You can see it.
And because I've developed that awareness, and because somebody asked me the other day, she said to me, Melanie, don't tell me you're not clairvoyant. And I said, I'm not even one bit clairvoyant. I don't have any clairvoyance. She said, well, how did you know that? I said, you know what I've learned to do? Put together karmic tapestries. Okay. I can put them together very quickly. When someone's sitting in front of me, I can put your karmic tapestry together very quickly. And what I'm looking for is the repetitive imprints, how they are showing themselves, something that keeps coming back in all your relationships, in all your work situations, in everything, something that keeps coming back. Okay. And of course, I'm saying, I'm warning you not to touch. You're going to get burned. They aren't listening at that stage because they don't feel they're ready. They don't know that they're sitting right now getting that because that's absolutely right for them, but they're not ready. You've got to be ready. Yeah, you have
it's like if you want, it's here and you want to go, I don't know this area, but I mean, if you want to go down the road, kilometers, but eventually you will get there. The one just takes.
Yeah, exactly. And you'll find that when it's pointed out to you a whole lot of times, it suddenly starts sinking in. Because what we're doing is we're going back to our original nature, which was pure. It never was tainted by all these things that we've created. I was talking to someone the other day, and he said, oh my God, he said, this technology, it's driving me mad. All my kids know much more than I do. I just said, I just want to ask you one question. I said, yeah. I said, has it helped people? That's what I want to know. Has it helped people, this absolute vast technology? Has it helped people? Well, it's helped us to make contact. It's helped us to be able to have teaching. It's helped us to be on Zoom now. It's helped in a lot of ways, but it hasn't helped with that inner part of us that needs to connect. And so what you're saying is really very valuable and would be nice for you to talk to Danielle about how you got there. But when you say you got used to death because a lot of your family members died when you were young, that's a very interesting thing, because most people who lose a lot of members of their family at a very early age of their lives, have got a phobia about death. They've got a phobia about losing people. And so they're the kind of people whose children go out and they say, where are you? Phone me when you get there. Go, tell me whenever you get to a particular place, let me know where you are. What time are you leaving to come home? It's like, if I can control the whole world, then death won't come after me. And what you're saying is the opposite. Death is the most beautiful moment, because it's the moment of realizing exactly who you are. And what a pity that so many people don't manage to do that. So thank you for that, Karen. Anyone else?
I'm just saying, I was with my mother and
You were with both of them when they died. That's
my
unbelievable.
twin brother, and it was actually wonderful because I could just direct them through the bardo. I
That
mean, so
Unbelievable.
whether they knew it or not, and then I could go with the Tibetan Book of the Dead. But yes,
That's
so it
amazing.
was actually very almost beautiful to be with them. I mean, that is my thing in life.
That
I know
is
is to work with the dying. So
It is
mm,
absolutely beautiful. It's so beautiful. And I think
Mm.
lots of people should come to you for that. So let's just do one more thing, and then we'll do a little meditation. But if we look at, because we're going to talk about the causes and conditions, if we look at the 12 links in the Wheel of Life, okay, this previous lifetime and your motivation causes this lifetime. This lifetime has got feelings and cravings and all of that. And then it goes on to the next lifetime of sickness, old age, birth, and death. That's how the Wheel of Life goes. So what we've got to look at on that Wheel of Life is not only one primary cause for things, for an effect to occur, but also the secondary conditions and circumstances. It's very important to understand that it's not just a cause and effect, it's all the circumstances. And so we've got to really, really, really see how, if we want to get off that wheel of samsara, we've got to understand that as soon as those feelings come up, it's really important to see what they are all about, because it is those feelings that the Dalai Lama said that change everything. And karma is something which only belongs to the level of Sem, the human mind. It does not belong to Rigpa or the true nature of mind. It does not belong to that. It only belongs to the limited functioning of the human mind. And Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche says, mastery over the conditioning we're accustomed to can benefit us in the present situation, because he says, just what Karen's been saying, when you arrive in the afterlife bardo, so when you arrive at death, your aggregates, which is your form, feelings, perceptions, habits, and consciousness, and the coarse elements collapse. And at that moment, only the unconditioned can help you, not what you've conditioned your mind and made all these things with your limited mind. Only the unconditioned can help you. And as long as our conditioned habitual patterns obscure that nature, we can't experience it. And so we have to grow familiar with the unconditioned. So it's really important to summarize what the Dalai Lama was saying last week, that the true nature is not subject to causes or conditions or karma. It's beyond that. And he says, the Dalai Lama said that the suffering we don't want and the happiness we long for arise only in dependence upon the causes and conditions. So why are the causes and conditions so important? Why? Why does he talk so much about the causes and conditions?
If no one's going to take a stab at it.
No one? Go.
Well, it's because it's the reason for things appearing and actually coming to be is solely because of that. I mean, it can either be foreordained, which it isn't. It can either be random, which it isn't. And so it's cause and effect. Actions have consequences. To think that things just appear out
But
of
more
nothing.
than that, it's causes and conditions, not only
Positive,
causes.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. You got
You
the primary
planted-
causes.
Yeah, if you
and the
plant an
consequences.
apple tree, you'll get apples, but not unless you've got soil, water, the motivation to plant it. You must bring the conditions in because we create those conditions. And then when we get burnt, we're crying. Sorry, but I had to say that,
Sorry,
you know.
That reminds me of something I also wanted to say, you know, we want to
Okay.
be happy. And with all of our intelligence, we don't stop and ask, hey, what are the causes? Which also reminds me of something else you said when you mentioned the 4 like noble truths. We want happiness, but we don't use our intelligence to think, hey, what are the causes so we can gather them? And we want to avoid suffering, and yet we don't stop to think, hey, what might the causes of suffering be, you know, so that we might avoid them? It's that simple, because we actually inside, a lot of us do believe that things are foreordained, which
Yeah,
means
but
I could just...
what's simple? Last week, I read them Taisitu's thing on karma. He said, even with one feather of a peacock's tail, there were a multitude of conditions and causes and all of that kind of thing. It's not just you hit me, I get hit back, you know, or I hit you back. It's very, very complex. Human beings are very, very, very complex. And what we have to realize, and this is the most important point of the Dalai Lama's teaching, he said, anything that depends on causes and conditions to come into existence, those causes and conditions are also there for its disintegration and cessation, the same causes and conditions. So in other words, when you are born, you don't have to say to the universe, hey, it's time for me to die. As you are born and the causes and conditions come about for your birth, so later the causes and conditions come about for the disintegration of that human being. We don't have to bring them about. Now, what does that mean? If the same causes that create our causes and conditions will disintegrate the phenomena, when a universe comes into birth, it's full of everything, and then eventually it will disintegrate just as we do. People who are totally bereft, eventually the pain and the depression, if they follow that journey of insight, will self-liberate, will liberate by itself. If we see them for what they are, if we take childhood traumas that come from previous causes and conditions that we set up, when we grow up, if we don't repress them, just like Karen said, she said, I lost my mother, my father, and my twin brother, and I helped them into the light. That's a very unusual circumstance, because a lot of us could feel, why did this happen to me? This is not fair. How did this happen? But if we allow those things, then they will dissolve. They will disintegrate. When we stop interfering and putting them into a place and making them what we think we want, they will disintegrate. They will dissolve because they came out of that pure nature. They will just dissolve back. But if we don't deal with them and see them for what they are, then they become what is called the impelling consciousness that catapults you into another lifetime with all those causes and conditions that you created in this lifetime. Wow, think about it. I mean, are we going to do this all over again? That impelling consciousness should not be there when we die. What's got to be there is your Buddha nature to take you up into the light, not the impelling consciousness of all those imprints which catapult you again into those circumstances.
Mel,
Not long, Eric.
Of course,
Only if
we
it comes from your heart. I don't want to quote. Okay.
about the peacock's feather, you know. Of course, I'm not saying it's simple to understand how every simple thing arose. I'm just saying this: the simple aspect is that wholesome activities lead to felicity and well-being, while unwholesome activities lead to suffering.
Not necessarily. It depends. Because if there are hosts and hosts and hosts of negative causes, then when you put in virtuous activities, they will start to bear fruits eventually. But because of all the causes and conditions that we put in before, they may not bear them even in this life.
Absolutely.
Now, think about that. That's
No.
very important, because people say do virtuous things and then you'll see the results. You may not see the results for a long time.
Exactly, but at least we won't be creating the causes for any future suffering. And when we do encounter suffering, we should be grateful, because now those past transgressions are being purified. All those seeds are being exhausted. And so it's a good
I want to hear from your heart, because you know all this theory. And I want to know how it affects your life. Like Karen had the guts now to stand up and say, I went through death as a child, and that has uplifted me completely. I don't want quotes. I want you all to be able to do this in this life. It's so vital. What else can I teach this year? You know, Tulku Urgent Rinpoche, all he ever teaches is how to go back to your Buddha nature, how to connect with your real, true, original nature. And then go back to the Garden of Eden. Don't you want to go back to the Garden of Eden? Yeah, Danielle. Did you want to? Yeah, go on.
So I think for me, I used to think, okay, well, if I do good in this world, etc., it'll be better. But what I've come to realize is what I feel is good is not necessarily good. It might actually be harming someone else.
Thank you.
Like, for example, if you have an addict in your life and you are doing good things for them, etc., you might actually be enabling them, which is not allowing them to, to have the consequences of what they're doing. So that's sort of where I'm from.
Exactement. So therefore, what's your conclusion? What you're saying is 100%. I've watched people not taking a stand with other people because you know they love them or they want to save them or whatever the case is. And you know what? That's exactly, Eric, are you hearing what Danielle's got to say? Because what she's saying is 100% correct. And that is why the only reliable source is your true nature. You have to be able to go back into that original nature to see what the truth about everything. I think what you're saying is absolutely profound. So how do we know when we are really putting good causes into effect, or when we are doing our own agenda because we can't stand what we see in front of us? I won't answer that. You can if you want. It's a very difficult thing to answer, but you have to come to know who you are and what you're doing in this life. Like, Ringu Tulku says, I was given a name, Ringu Tulku. He said, I didn't choose the name. He said, I was told, you're Ringu Tulku. He says, sometimes I'm told, you're such a good person, then I must be a good person. Sometimes you're told, you're such a bad person, then I must. He said, all these labels, we can't nakedly strip away the labels so we can see the truth. And sometimes when you say the truth, people do not like it. They're uncomfortable. I've watched people Like Corin, you do your death and dying. I do so much death and dying. I've watched people around death. They are so uncomfortable. When people go through tragic death, some people step across the road because they don't want to bump into that person because they don't know what to say. In the meantime, how do you know what to say? You don't. But if you're able to be there in your naked state of just being present with whatever is happening, then automatically that unstoppable life force that I talked about in the beginning comes through you. And it's all the way it needs to be. Mark, did you want to say something? You had your hand up, I think.
Yeah, I just want to share where, I mean, in a very practical and simple way, these contemplations also helped me. So I'm obviously leaving the country in a month's time and struggling, battling with a lot of things. And the one thing that I noticed is that there's a huge amount of attachment. So when you were talking earlier about philosophy and having a physical experience, I think, you know, a year ago I would have had a perfect philosophy about it, but I actually feel it today, and it's completely, honestly, it's ridiculous to see what I'm attached to. It is the road I'm driving in the mornings, things like that. I know the road, it's my road. I'm so attached to that. When I go to Germany, I don't know the road. So, you know, but what has really helped me from a Buddha's teaching in this is, and we spoke about death, is that I then at some stage in all my pain and my self-pity and all that, I realized that maybe this is a fantastic exercise and training for what happens when I die, because then I need to let go of everything. And now I just need to let go of
A road.
The road.
A road.
Exactly.
I told Martin he doesn't even have to let go of us because he can come on Zoom like Pam.
Yes.
He's joining you in
Yes.
Germany, Pam.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So go on. Tell us about this training for death.
Yeah, that I realized maybe it's what's happening to me now is a very good opportunity. It's not only like pain and sorrow and all that bad. It's rather a ground for practicing what will, you know, it may happen that a family member dies, but it's definitely a good practice for my own dying.
Definitely, but just one but for everybody, and then we'll meditate. Okay. The one thing that Martin, what he's saying is 100% valid, but inside us, we have a lot of feelings of loneliness, feelings of being afraid, feelings of pain, feelings of, you know, all those feelings. And sometimes I've watched people when they're going through something like immigration or the death of a partner or something like that. What they do is they repress those feelings and then they build a life on the philosophy of what they've learned in Buddhism. Well, this is a good training for me, which it is. This is a good training for me. I have to learn to let go. But they don't actually deal with the feelings. Now, the feelings are very important, and I'll tell you why. Because if you don't deal with those feelings, are made up, and this is what the Dalai Lama was teaching about, those feelings are made up of the same substance as the essence. So actually, even though they're expressing themselves as anger, pain, whatever, fear, whatever they are, they're actually made up of the same material as your pure essence, because they come out of your pure essence. So instead of pressing them down and making a philosophy which helps you to get by, you also need to look at those feelings. You need to look at your feelings of abandonment, your feelings of sorrow, your feelings. You need to allow them to come up. But the point is to see them for what they are. Now, how we see those feelings in our day-to-day lives with our human minds is we see those feelings as solid, permanent. We might even have a dark color of those feelings. We see those feelings as tangible. But those feelings are made up of interdependent causes. You know, the whole thing of going on the immigration, those are interdependent causes. And those same causes will dissolve them as soon as you allow it freedom. It will liberate itself. Why? Because this was the Dalai Lama's teaching, that the causes and conditions that created that feeling in the first place are the same as will dissolve those feelings if we let them liberate themselves. It's called self-liberation, not liberation of you. They liberate by themselves if you allow them. So that's just the one thing I want to add to you, that don't put the philosophy of I must go to my true nature, this is a good opportunity, without allowing the pain of loss. You're losing 28 years of your life. You're losing all the contacts you've got in your life. You're losing all the familiarity. It's really scary, and you have to allow those feelings to come up. And then once those feelings come up and you watch them dissolve, then you've got the philosophy. Danielle, do you understand what I'm saying? So you can't, if you're just dealing with the philosophy, then those feelings are going to come up and the imprint is going to really go deeper. Okay, it's really very important for you to understand that. But what I want to say is what the most important of all his teaching is. He says, what's the point of knowing all this? He says, although external matter may act as the cause for our experience of pain and pleasure, in other words, something out there is causing us pain and pleasure, the principal cause, whether we experience happiness or suffering, lies within. So he says, the Buddha pointed within for the origin of suffering, not outside, because he knew the principal causes of our suffering are our own negative emotions and the actions that those negative emotions make us do. And he says, any phenomena under the control of the negative emotions and actions are contaminated and by nature are suffering. So the only way you can put an end to that suffering is to know that the way you perceive the suffering is internal. That will give you the reflection around you of how you perceive it, and it will change the suffering. Yes, Dan.
Sorry, so I feel like I've experienced that. Like, I know you know all about, I moved into a new complex and it was awful, and every single thing that was there irritated me and made me angry and upset. Exactly. And then I started to shift, like I tried to notice when I felt like that, and then I started to focus on what I was feeling inside. And by shifting that, I now no longer really find the same things they're still there, but I don't find them as irritating or even irritating at all. So I think it might be that.
Absolutely brilliant analogy, because it is the way we perceive things that causes the suffering. If we knew that whatever we were going through in our lives was part and parcel of the causes and conditions that we created before, This is the opportunity, open portal to unity, to go back to our original nature. And without it, I saw that smile on your face. Without it, you can't do that, because you'll just go on. You'll go on with cause and effect and condition. You won't realize. You just won't realize that it is your feelings inside that taint a thing. You look at it and you say, I don't like this, I don't like that, I don't want this, I don't. And it's all your own feelings. Now, all of you sit. Yes, Dion, please.
Hi, Mel. I love what you're saying about that self-liberating of these things we perceive to be the things that we don't like. You know, we don't want these things in our lives, or the things that I don't want in my life. And I was thinking, before you said that, I was kind of looking at it from reverse. You know, from reverse, like I mean, like in my day, tracking back to where my practice is. You know, and what my practice actually does for me, because I still feel like these things that I perceive as like, say, like some sort of kind of desire for something and some sorrow, you know, it will still pop up in my day. But like very soon after that, like I have like a bit of a detachment from that, and I'm just like, I can see, I'm like, this isn't, the emptiness is form is emptiness. This is not like, I don't, you know, kind of bash myself so much about like the fact that I'm engaged in this, or I failed, or I'm doing it wrong, that whole narrative. I just kind of more quickly let it go. And then you know, just I try to sink into that reality that I am clear luminosity. That this is not the reality. This problem, this thing that I'm seemingly obsessing about, you know. And for me, that's like feels like a positive sign that it's like maybe that's like the causes and conditions that I'm getting from the practice.
It's wonderful and amazing. And what you're saying is 100% right, because that's what happens when you start doing the practice. Then you start to get another perspective of things. That's how I am when I'm looking at a person in front of me. I try not to look at them any longer, I think I did before, with biased eyes, coming from my internal whatever crap there is inside me. I try and stand back and see it as it really is. Because remember, nothing is negative. Nothing is negative that just got there as negative. We perceived it as negative. Maybe it was a cleanup operation for us. Do you know what I'm saying? So that's amazing.
Because it's like if you get into that thing, it's like I'm judging myself, but it's like what is yourself? What are you judging? You know, it's like
exactly.
It's like fighting myself in the boxing ring is a type of thing. You know,
I really
it doesn't even make sense.
But it's fantastic that you've managed to do that. But let's do a little meditation, everybody. Just sit in your meditation posture and breathe in the fresh air. Everybody breathe in the fresh air. It's so important because I want you to remember that the Buddha nature is fresh. It's never stale. It always knows. And we need to have freshness. Our gaze in life needs to be refreshing. Pain and pleasure are there for all, from beggars to children, to kings, to sick people. No matter what the degree of suffering, everyone tries to solve the problems by various methods, often requiring continuous struggle. Some may solve their problems a little, but what is important is to find the truth, the antidote to all the suffering. The one panacea is the understanding the conviction that no matter what feelings of pleasure and sorrow are experienced, nothing has any substantial existence, and all is just a mental projection and a label. Now, when we begin to understand that, we can breathe in and breathe out, and we can allow everything to be. The spaciousness, the blueness, the openness of your true nature can accommodate everything. So open yourself, breathe in and out, come to the freshness of life. Don't hang on to your birth. Don't hang on to your identity. Don't hang on to not dying. Just let them all be in their rightful place at their rightful time. And as Karen loves to say, go to the fourth time. It's not the past. It's not the future. And it's not gripping onto the present, which is already the past in half a second. It's a place beyond time and space, which we carry right within our hearts. And we need to take the time to find that and stabilize it and trust in it. The Buddha pointed within for the origin of suffering, not outside, because he knew the principal causes of our suffering are our own negative emotions and the actions they drive us to do. Nothing else. We change the inside, and the movie is different after a while. The outside movie. So I'd like to tell you something funny, just to lighten it up. That when these two, the martial arts master and Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche were dialoguing, he actually said this, and he said this in a light way. The audience were killing themselves laughing, but it was such a profound thing. He said, because the martial arts master was bowing to him and saying how grateful he was that he was there. And he said, today, I am sitting as a monk and a Rinpoche in this seat. Next life, you may be sitting in my seat and I may be sitting in yours. You may be Rinpoche and I may be a martial arts master. And I may even get into movies, he said. And the whole audience were roaring of laugh. But that little statement was just showing us the temporary, transient nature of our relative lives. And when we identify with that identity, you know, when we identify with the identification of Melanie, Martin, Vian, Linda, Marion, Kathy, when we identify with that, we're making a big mistake, because the Dalai Lama said, all phenomena are empty of a self-existence. And what does that mean? Does it mean it doesn't exist? It's interesting, because the other master talks about how we can work with the ego, which we'll talk about not tonight. But he says, if something doesn't have an independent, inherent existence, then why do we grasp at it? So you don't have an independent existence. You are made up of a multitude of causes and conditions. You're not an independent entity. The only thing that's an independent entity is your awakened nature. It doesn't depend on causes and conditions. So best we go there. But if we believe that something is inherently existent, then we grasp at it, and he says there's a discrepancy, a gap between how things appear to us and how things really are. There's a discrepancy. We need to close that discrepancy. We need to start seeing things as they are, not as we perceive them to be. Nothing is tangible, not your children, not your life in South Africa, Mart, not your family. Nothing is tangible and independent. It's changing all the time. So why not believe when you're going through a lot of sorrow that it's going to change in a little time? And it is. But let me tell you an interesting thing. That when I deal with bereaved people who've like lost a child or something really quite tragic, what is so interesting is that those that go on the journey to find their true natures with me, the ones I've dealt with, they get better. But I know some that never get better. They are bitter, they are sorrowful, and they live out their lives waiting until they can meet with that child again. That is so sorrowful to me. Because what do they think? That child is going to be waiting on the other side in its same form, waiting for you, the mother. No. That child was temporarily here. It was never a self-existing entity. It was there because of a multitude of causes. When those causes and conditions had expired, the child had to leave. And now it needs to go to another movie. It's not going to come back to that little family. So what are we grasping onto? Can we go to a point where there's no more suffering? It still hurts, but it's not long-term suffering. He says, when the ignorance which grasps and apprehends things as inherently existent is realized to be an error, when you realize it one day, it opens up a possibility for us to see through the deception and so put an end to the negative emotions that ignorance causes. Therefore, there is a possibility of putting an end to suffering. A big possibility. Depending on what effort you're prepared to put in, it actually is an effortless thing, but you have to put a lot of effort in. So before we end, does anyone want to comment or ask or say or anything? Please do. Yes, go on, Eric. If it's from your heart.
It's hard. My heart is still faulty. The only thing I can say from experience is that with laying the foundation of ethics, you truly do taste, you know, the fruit of cultivating your inner resources of well-being. The thing I wanted to say,
Eric, I'm scared of what you call ethics. I'm really scared of it. Okay. I don't know what
non-violence,
ethics are.
not hurting and helping where you can. That's all. That's what ethics boils down to for me.
Okay, but then
You
why
never
why use the label ethics?
because it's Sila. Sila Samadhi Prajna. Ethics, mental balance, and wisdom.
No, because you know what? You've got to use, that is a label, ethics. When I hear ethics, it turns me upside down because it's like, you know, this is right and this is wrong. And that's where we're going beyond. We're going beyond that. So then why didn't you just say what you wanted to say?
Well, what I wanted to say is that
Yes,
whether
yes.
waking reality or dream reality, we have to realize that there isn't anything objectively or subjectively that's
Yeah.
inherently real. So even now, everything exists through the power of our labels. Things are pleasant because we label it as such, and things are unpleasant because we label it as such. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, leave it at that. But you know what? If you've got something new to say, it's got to come from your heart. And I'm going to train you in that, Eric. I'm telling you now. Because if you listen to Karen commenting, it came right from deep in her own
I'm
heart.
going to butt in. Eric,
Oh,
I'm going to
please.
butt in.
Yeah,
Eric,
go.
very, very easy. Say what you said again, but take out the we and change it to I, even though we're trying to get rid of the I. But if you start saying not we, I agree with you on ethics, but we're not, okay, because then that's judging the
Why
very
are
thing
you
that we were
telling him
talking
to
about
take
earlier
out-
on.
Why are you telling him to take out me? It's 100% correct. Why
Yeah,
are you?
But if you take out the we and you start with the I, even though ultimately we're trying to get rid of the I, but if you start with the I, then you will start, if all your incredible knowledge, which you really have profound knowledge,
Yes,
will
yeah.
start coming from the heart. What I think, Hamel, I don't know, it's just a suggestion.
What you're trying to say, which is really true, that when you go, we have this and this and this, you're making suppositions about everybody, and not everybody is in that point. So it misses that in a many ways. So if he was in a monastery debating, I would debate him and I'd say, what do you mean we? I don't feel like you, you know? We debate it. You got to knock it, because now you're going to take all your knowledge and your wisdom and you're going to put it into your heart and you're going to give it out so that one day you could teach, Eric. Anyway, that's enough on poor Eric. Let's dedicate to all sentient beings, especially two categories. One, all the people under the ground in the earthquake, especially those that are still alive. I really, really dedicate all these teachings to them, to know that this is a temporary, transient situation, going to clear out many of your karmic imprints. And it's really important that all of you who are under the ground wake up and you're able to go into the light. And the second category, which troubles me so much, is the people who are being executed in Iran for expressing themselves or for protesting. I can actually vomit when I think of that. When I think of an execution in this day, modern day and age, it makes my whole stomach turn. So I'm dedicating to all of those who are getting executed to know that that was a transient, temporary life, not to be attached to everything that was there, and that maybe what they did was really of a positive deed to try and free all others. And as they die, to take all the pain and suffering of those who are being subjugated into their own selves. And I dedicate for everyone in this world. Through this merit, may we achieve all-seeing Buddhahood, and thereafter, once all harmful enemies have been defeated, may all beings be liberated from the ocean of existence, stirred by the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Sonam die tamche zipane topne nepe dranam pamshene jegana chi balak topaye sipe sole duadro warsho.